So Serge, I'd like to talk to you about love in this episode. And love is it's the foundation of nearly every religion. You know, we have this innate sense that we are love, we are made of love, that love is like the pinnacle of human experience. But in fact, in recent times, you've been talking about love as simply the absence of letting through forces. So to love another is to ensure that you bring a vehicle to that relationship or that interaction that doesn't allow forces to come through. Now that in itself is quite a revelation, so I'll get you to extrapolate on that. But also, basically you've posited that love is a base level foundation. When we go to the depth of who we are, that's just the first base. It's first base. And in fact, there's a deeper enrichment to be had in our relationships, which I'd love you to talk about in this episode. So yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Maybe we can present it as a lineal illustration first, and then we can talk about it. Then the viewer will understand what we're elaborating. So if that's 0, and then that way is an advance, let's say, where we should be. So if that's 0, that's actually love. So anywhere, any part that way is not love. It's and I'll talk about what that is. But what we have is a situation where we are so far that way that this becomes quite a magnificent experience when we actually get to true love. But that's the setup, that's the problem. The problem is that we are so far away that when we experience love, it's out of this world. And so what we do is we use that peak, but we can't sustain it because our model of life supports us being that far, that side of the ledger. And so we hit here as the summit of experience. Yeah, so it's the crown, but we don't sustain it because our model of life actually supports that way of being. So a lot of people experience it and many don't. But even with those who do, stop at that and then fall short and then crave it again. So it's this toing and froing, ebb and flow in relationship to 0. In other words, ground 0, an absolute base. What's on the other side of that is what love allows. So love is actually an energetic playing field, an energetic canvas that allows the purity of energetic integrity to be such that we can then explore who we truly are by the nature of the multidimensionality that composes us. And so that's when we start to get very, it just gets very magnificent because it's a magnificence that's beyond human. It's superhuman magnificence because we start to then understand what intimacy is at the level of star, planetary and constellation levels, and not just the human frame hitting that peak. And so we understand that there is so much to fall in love with, but what actually falling in love with is greater levels of integrity.
Wow.
So it's actually a scale of integrity, not a scale of love as we understand the emotional aspect of it, which is a doing rather than being at one with something that is so much greater in integrity, that you are allowed to be who you truly are in your complete fullness with no interference. So that side of love has interference and impediment. When you hit the moment of love, love is truly the freedom to be who you truly are, that you're offering to another. And then from then on, we start to experience the intimacy of what it's like to be with that person in their full capacity, understanding their true multidimensional origins.
That's huge. So if we look at what's on the side of the scale that is before love, if love is our peak and our pinnacle, and we only know that as our peak and our pinnacle, then you get to love, and then there's nowhere to go from the top of that summit but back down into mundanity. That's what you're talking about with the ebb and flow. And so on that scale back there, you've got things like function, you've got things like considered arrangements, so that you're considerate to someone, you're tolerant of someone. You've got all these ways of being that is based on a management rather than an enrichment. And so we need to actually blow out the paradigm that love is our peak. If we make love our base, then that's the foundation for the enrichment that you're talking about to be on offer. And when you're talking about that it's greater forms of integrity that are past that point of love, integrity is a very beautiful word because it denotes a wholeness. When something has integrity, it has wholeness. But what is that wholeness? If we're only just glimpsing our being of ourselves when we get to the point of love, how whole can that wholeness be? How deep can that wholeness be? Because we are a spark in the universe. So that's what you're talking about with greater levels of integrity, because the more that you connect to that wholeness, the vaster that wholeness becomes.
Yeah, that's correct. And along that scale, we can introduce things like, without, and I'm saying this respectfully and without critique, but only at zero can we truly say there is a relationship. Before that, it has to be an arrangement. And beyond that, it has to be a field of combat. So you either have combat, which is competition, comparison, and the occasional, conflict and friction that goes on. And then you move into an arrangement, which is really just a comfortable exchange of what to do and what not to do so that you don't trigger each other back into combat. And then you go into the process of understanding relationship. But relationship is really just the integrity of respecting each other such that there is full expression. And that's a very beautiful experience, but only compared to combat and arrangement. But when we start to get into the expression of our true integrities, in the expression of our true multidimensionality, and you get to experience the aliveness and expression of somebody at many different levels and dimensions other than human, then it's a kapow moment, which is greater than love. And that greater than love experience is the field of intimacy. And intimacy cannot go without transparency, because then you are free to be transparent. This is what love does. Love allows you to be so transparent that you can bring many more dimensions of who you are that this world has not allowed you to be or not prepared you to be, but are always there. And as you get given more permission, you expand on that transparency. As that transparency comes through and becomes very real, then we have an exchange of intimacy and on a much greater level.
Where does trust come into the equation in that? Because there's a factor of, many people would have experienced in close, intimate relationships that they feel that they can bear more of themselves to that other person than they can with Joe the neighbour or the person down at the shop. They feel like that they're safe to let themselves be seen at deeper levels with just one person because they've built a trust with them. But you're talking about an intimacy that doesn't discriminate with who you're connecting with. It's a transparency of letting that depth be seen no matter what the interaction is. Can you talk a bit about what part trust plays?
Yeah, trust is a very important fundamental element of human life, based on the fact that we've been hurt, based on the fact that we've been abused, based on the fact that people take advantage of you, bully you, defame you, all those things. So trust is important. But when you hit the element of love, then there is no need for trust, because love has such a great integrity that it gives you openness to be. The word trust does not exist in that field of exchange, because you are held in an energy that you can feel completely gives you permission. You've been confirmed to be allowed to be everything that you truly are. And so you start to express that, but the word trust doesn't come into it.
You don't have to trust it because you know it. You know the openness that you're being offered allows you the space to be you. Trust almost indicates that you have to have some form of caginess, you have to have some form of questioning. But when you're in a field of love and you're in the space that love holds, you can just let your guard down and you don't have to trust or not trust. Is that what you're kind of saying?
That's correct. And one of the elements of not having trust, when we supersede the need for trust and we don't, it just doesn't exist anymore. Also, that freedom to be who you truly are is time-free. Not timeless, but time-free, hyphenated. In other words, you can be all of who you are at the rate in which you feel to unfold it, not that somebody's putting pressure on you to become it by a certain time.
Because that then knocks out the expectancy factor, the expectation factor that plagues so many relationships that are in arrangement and combat, would you say?
That's correct.
Yeah, because expectancy of any time, even patience, is a form of expectancy, because if you're being patient with someone, that's a refined form of waiting for them to get it, kind of thing. So even in that highest ideal, it's still time bound, whereas space allows another person to unfold at their own rate without any expectation on it.
Yeah, many people, many people say to me, you're so patient. And I say, I'm not patient. I don't even consider patience. It's really simply, if you love people, you just give them the space to be, and you allow them to come into their own. But there's another element that love at that zero mark does, because it's so highly because it's the foundation of integrity for the entire universe. It doesn't have a marker of what you need to be or not be, but it has a marker of your completion. In other words, you are the end result before you do anything. So before you unfold what is there to unfold, it is holding you at the end result. If you take, let's say, for example, 1,000 years to unfold it, if we were to put it in the context of time, even though it's timeless or time-free, it doesn't matter, because it already held you at zero at where you will be 1,000 years from now. And therefore, there's no such thing as trust, and there's no such thing as patience, because you are holding someone to no time already in their completeness and allowing them at their own rate to unfold through the practice of transparency and intimacy to get to the true integrities they can access and express.
That's so huge, because that just obliterates the pressure that we put on ourselves. Like, if we knew ourselves to be in that wholeness and that completeness, then self-judgment, self-bashing, impatience with ourselves, that's all blown out of the water, because you are already whole, you are already it. There's nowhere to get to but a surrender to the depth that's already there. That's the timelessness of the expression of love, isn't it?
Yes, and then a relationship can never ever suffer any form of mundaneness or require any need of distraction through entertainment or anything else, because there's the beauty of the continuance of that unfoldment that allows you to enjoy. But any one single aspect of that multidimensional integrity is enough to fulfill your entire life. So imagine if that was continuously unfolding. It really is a beyond this world type of intimacy that you are enjoying with another person. And it doesn't have to be your partner alone. You can have it with friends. If you have a friendship based on an engagement that we called religious intimacy, or religious activity, it is a continuous unfoldment of who they truly are through the integrities of their multidimensionality.
I mean, this is huge, because I guess it can't even begin to be understood, that level of intimacy, until we also knock out what intimacy doesn't mean, because that word has been bastardized in our language to have a connotation to sex, nakedness in the flesh form, intimacy, like my intimate partner, my intimate other. It often has a connotation around a sexual experience. But why has it been bastardized like that? What's the true understanding of intimacy? What's being masked by that bastardization?
Well, the suppression of who we truly are is the model of life we live in. There's no question about that. And, the decisions are usually made by people who don't experience what you're talking about. So you basically get reduced into the levels of experience and intelligence they are coming from to be able to box you so that they can feel themselves brighter and more intelligent and able to reduce you. But if you've never experienced the levels of love at the multidimensional scale of intimacy and integrity, then you can't refer to someone to say, hey, you use the word intimacy, therefore that must mean nakedness and sex and, bedtime activities and things. Well, that's not how I use the word intimacy. I haven't used it in that way for 20 years, almost 21 years. So when you use the word intimacy on me, don't impose upon what you say it is when I have a track record that says intimacy means this. And so once you start to understand that level of life, you have your own level of vocabulary that you rely on that has a completely different meaning because it's uncompressed. In other words, it's not belonging to the suppression of what those words have been made to mean away from what they truly represent. And so love is not the emotional kind. For 20 years, for me, love is in zero of emotion, but it is this offering of absolute integrity and space so that another person can be who they truly are at the rate that they choose to. And so another person comes along and says, oh, I judge that to be patience. And even though that might be a compliment and intended to be so, or perhaps a confirmation of the fact, either way, it's actually not patience at all. But they reduce the incidents down to patience, or the word patient, under their meaning and definition, because they don't understand what it is to offer space at the level of time-free exchange that allows another person to unfold at their own rate.
Beautiful. And you can see how there's a corrupted copy or interpretation on things from that reductionist mindset that can't know from that mold the fullness and the depth that you're talking about, simply because it's in that paradigm of that suppression. But what's interesting is when you see like the explosion of apparently people seeking intimacy in the world through the corrupted version of that, whether that be through porn or sex addiction or constantly looking for the next relationship or a million Tinder flings or whatever it be, but behind that, like that's the corrupted version. But from what you're saying, there is a deeper underlying call from the body that says we want true intimacy, but that's all that we have been kind of schooled in and got given, and that's kind of the wayward behaviour of the corrupted version of intimacy. Because when you kind of expose the fact that intimacy is the highest pinnacle, love is not the highest pinnacle, that there's a depth of intimacy we can have to each other, that's true nakedness. That's it. Like when someone can see past your physicality deep into your soul, that's the true meaning of that beauty of nakedness. And that's something that we've only had the corrupted version for so long.
Well, you can truly make love to the stars. You can truly have a conversation with the stars. You can, you're having a conversation, having dinner with multidimensionality. That's what I'm talking about. Love is just the basis that allows that to happen. And then it's an unfoldment of tremendous amount of transparency and intimacy that allows us to go into a realm where you don't need to use the word love, you just know that it's the basis. But the word love is not used because other activities are so much more enriching than love. You don't not appreciate it, but you understand that you're only standing on the foundation of this universal form of love that allows you to go to other areas of experiencing what religious intimacy is truly all about. Now, the other factor is that we should call it the corrupted versions of intimacy, the corrupted versions of love, the corrupted versions of making love, which is sex, etc. But when we say that, we're only energetically giving it its correct title and definition by virtue of what it energetically is. But we don't need to be critical if somebody is there, because we've all been there. Every single one of us has to be there. That's the model of life we are born into, and we have to have that. But there will come a time when that is not enough. When, as you said earlier, 1,000 flings is not enough. And the fling is only good at the time that it's happening. And in between flings, you're back into the trough that makes you want to crave it again. No one stays on a high because we're not supposed to stay on a high. There's that trough that keeps you into that insatiability, that striving for always achieving another peak. Whereas when you move into love, you are in this equanimity of stableness, steadfastness that allows you to hold so steady that there is only one way to go, and that's to expand what is already there. So you're not changing anything, you're just expanding what is already there. Therefore, there is no peak and there is no trough, because it's really just the emanation of something just expanding of itself.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I really love that you brought in that it's not a case of judgment. It's not a case of judgment if you're feeling, if you're in the corrupted versions of intimacy, or if you're doing the flings or whatever. It's not about judging that movement. This is just more like, let's open up a broader scope and look at what's actually possible for us as human beings, and the depth of experience and multidimensionality we can actually bring to this plane of life. Because what's clear from the rates of devastation, you see it on the internet, and people are crying out for something more. Like, it looks like they're searching for it in the corrupted forms of intimacy, but really, I've heard you talk about, that's a deeper call from the body, that people are saying there's got to be more than this. And
if there's a call to have more than what you have identified as being it, but not being it. So you went and sought what was taught to you, schooled into you, that would be the it of it, and suddenly you don't. There's a deeper call for, well, what else is there? Because something inside you tells you there is more. But because it's not there, it creates an industry based on the corruption of the need, without understanding that your call is well above what you are now involved in. And so you settle for the status quo that you think is fulfilling your insatiability. But in truth, what is happening is the lack of the emanation that you come from, the lack of integrity that is not being accessed. And so really it's very, very simple. But somebody who's watching this show, watching this episode, and is not in a position where they can have that and can't envisage that, they might think we're making it up, or that it's utopian, it's imagined, it's a fantasy, or perhaps by comparison, they're going to be critical of what they hear in this. But yourself, you have an amazing relationship. You are now experiencing love at a level that you did not fathom was possible in real life situation. It's not perfect, neither is mine, and it's not designed to be perfect, but it's designed to be is the experience of something that is accessible, and understanding that we do have the ability to access it. Whether we do or not is a different matter. The more we access it, the more consistent it becomes. But the fact that we are introduced to the possibility that we can access it is the greatest blessing we can receive, because once we are introduced into that, then it's up to us.
Yeah, and then we move into that. Once we can see the possibility, and that's the beauty of the enrichment that you bring when you speak about these levels, because it's certainly awakened that in me. And I mean, my relationship has just deepened and blossomed because of this understanding. And, I would say only 6 months ago, like if I look at 6 months ago in my relationship, the amount of subtle layers of protection that I had up between me and my partner, was a level of transparency that I wasn't going to at that time. And then when you let go that guard, that protection, there's a whole other level of access that is available, and you just feel space. And there's a settlement in that space. Like, it's so hard to put into words how beautiful it feels to be able to be in your own beauty without you in protection and without someone else in protection that you feel you have to negotiate their protections. Or, like, it's so common in relationships, though, that we're negotiating each other's forms of protection and not pressing that button, not pressing that button. And when you actually just let all of that go, it's almost like you then have a deeper oneness with the other person. And then you feel like you're moving as one, and then there's the two as one, and it's a greater volume of feeling.
Yeah, that haggling only leads to caution and trepidation and the occasional peak moment of trust and explosion of, ecstasy. What we should really have is permission, confirmation, and appreciation. You'd give someone a complete space to be all that they truly are in the complete transparency of the multidimensionality they have, right? So there's the permission. And then when they express it, you confirm it. You don't shut it down. You don't compare. You don't get jealous. You don't react. You just simply confirm it. And then you appreciate that you've been elevated by the fact that they're holding you in that multidimensional expression. So wherever they have gone to, you are held as an equal to that because they have chosen to be with you or have aligned to be with you, which is the correct term for it. So they've aligned to be with you. So that means that wherever they have gone to, that they treasure so much that is beyond this world, they have aligned to have you as part of their parallel to that, which is, one of the greatest showings of love there is. In other words, the ability to say, hey, you're like this too.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it's so beautiful to appreciate is the fact that you don't have to wait for the other person to do it.
No.
And this is one of the greatest fallacies that we get put into righteousness and right and wrong is, but he did this to me, but she did that to me, so I'm not going to, like, it's that tit for tat paradigm which entraps everybody at some point. But when you really actually let the other person in, regardless of what their movements or behaviours are, it's quite incredible, the transformation, if that space is offered, how quickly the other person can align to say, oh, wow, I can be myself and I want to be a part of that transmission in the relationship.
Yeah, look, we can say, I'll be a little bit lighthearted here, is that, we can say, I want to get married in a church, or I want to get married in a synagogue or a temple, or we want to get married in a fantastic island, or, on Ayers Rock or something like that, if we're allowed to. But we have all these pictures, but we should really just get married in space. Because really that's what we want. The actual reality of what offers us our greatest opportunity to be at one with another is the quality of what space brings. So you can still do it in a church and you can still do it wherever you want to go. It's not a problem. But really what we should be saying is that right and wrong cannot exist without time. So let's get married in space and let's stay in space, because space is actually time-free. Because time doesn't actually exist.
Wow. Can you extrapolate right and wrong cannot exist in time? How does the science of that work?
It's very simple. Right and wrong, to be right and to be wrong. So to be right means that I have measured you to deliver at a certain level by a certain time. Because if I gave you by a measurement. Yeah, in other words, if I give you your entire life to be right, then I can never say you're wrong at any moment. But if I have a cutoff, if I say, hey, you're now 47, 52, 32, 33, 27, and you still haven't got it, then by virtue of that imposition, I make you wrong. But what I'm doing is I'm not judging you by right or wrong. I'm imposing upon you by the measure of time. So time is defining what is right and wrong. So if you remove time, that person should be given the opportunity to be encouraged to get it right for them without coming across and making them feel wrong. In other words, keep confirming and allowing another person to go to that place
where unfolding their learning.
Correct.
They're just unfolding their learning. And it's not and therefore you're not getting a mark of right or wrong. Now you should get it by this stage.
Yeah. But what we're talking about here is the resurrection aspect of that side of the zero, you know, and once you get into that, all of that doesn't exist, because really you're just in the intimacy of that allowing, which only needs confirmation and appreciation, because you've given someone complete permission to access everything that they can. And there is not, the word relationship just doesn't cut it when you're into that. It's just so much more grand than relationship that you can only describe it by calling it universal intimacy or religious intimacy or universal activity, etc.
That's super beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The material in this video is based upon the principles of the Ageless Wisdom, which offers an energetic understanding of life. Any references to science are references to energetic science, as presented by the Ageless Wisdom, and not to evidence-based science in mankind's current era. Any references to specific aspects of medicine are to illustrate the relevance of energetic wisdom, as presented by the Ageless Wisdom, in the interplay of bodily illness and disease, rather than contradicting the current theories of disease causation or in any way to replace epidemiology. The principles conveyed in this video are philosophical and religious, and thus are not verified within the evidence-based rationales and critical appraisal process of evidence-based science, including Consort 2010, compliant double-blind randomised controlled trials. Serge Benhayon and Universal Medicine's presentations and teachings do not diagnose, treat, prevent, or offer any therapeutic cure to any disease or illness, are complementary to medicine, and are never a replacement of or alternative to conventional medicine. If you have any questions or concerns about the prevention, cause, diagnosis or treatment of any disease or illness, you should consult a registered medical practitioner.